Hello, and welcome to the Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick podcast. Each week, I interview someone who has found their passion and is pursuing it. And this week, my guest is Ralph Gabriner. Ralph is a photographer who sees the significant in the ordinary. He holds that life is a movable feast, constantly shifting its shapes and shadows. He describes his photographs as merely observations of common elements that happen also to be symbols of a mind state. Each photograph is an invitation to the viewer to explore the particular and personal emotion or feeling that is evoked. Ralph, it's a great pleasure to have you here today, and
Thank you
welcome.
so much, Ellen. It's a great pleasure to be here,
Great.
principally because a working artist spends his life working often, and in this case in particular, without any acknowledgement whatsoever. And I just want to say at the outset that it's meaningful.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it is. Would you like to share, do a screen share and share some of your photographs so that the viewer
Sure.
will also be
Good idea. Yeah. So the cover photograph is taken in New York City, and it is seen from above, pictures of children playing, but the dominant feature of the photograph are their interacting shadows. And shadows are an important element of the story of childhood, in my opinion. I like the dynamic action of this photograph. I like the individual solitariness of that each child seems to express. One's bouncing a ball, one's riding a bike, several are writing with chalk. And this is, I guess, something that psychologists call parallel play. They're not interacting with each other, but they are being with each other. They're all aware of each other. And as I said, the shadow is the dominant pictorial element. Let me see if I can find another example of a shadow picture. Just, this, the shadow is also an important element in the allegory of Plato's cave, how we perceive reality. And the picture for me is about the delight of the young child and mother seeing the distortion of their shadows, knowing that these distortions came from their physical bodies and yet somehow produce this incredibly long-legged reality. Yeah. That happens to be my wife and daughter. That's another thing about this book. It intermingles personal photographs, that is, pictures of my children, with pictures of children around in the different countries that I've traveled in. The story of Kinderszenen in this, as this book progresses, is that even as we age, we are still the children of someone, even if that someone is no longer alive. Our memory of being a child is still with us. And as we move closer and closer in age towards a termination point, the child never stops living inside us, and we never stop. And eventually we become a parent to our own parents, who become in some ways childlike. The difference in size between the child in this photograph and the parent is also visible if you go back a few pages. The picture on the right here shows my wife and her mother sitting on a bench. And the difference in size between these two figures is very striking to me. You can barely see the head of my mother-in-law peeking above the edge of the bench. She's, in a sense, shrunken and become a kind of child. She needs the kind of care and protection that a child needs. And this is a stage of our life. I didn't have this opportunity with my own parents to provide, but I'm very grateful that I have this chance with my mother-in-law to be a parent to her as she gets smaller. The picture on the left is a portrait made by my wife of me playing the recorder, holding my son in my lap while my daughter is taking a bath in the background. And I love this photograph because it characterizes the complete chaos and insanity of raising children, and at the same time trying to carve out a little time for yourself as a sentient adult, you know. And I also had the egotistical idea that playing classical music to them in the bathtub would in some way inform their adult lives, that this would be a cherished memory for them. But like all parents, I discovered that this was just a fabrication of my imagination. They could care less about this and probably have no memory of it. Even though I often played the recorder while they were in the bathtub.
And also, like this one on the left here,
Yeah,
there's a feeling of what, well, to me, there's a feeling of, you know, that going to sleep and the fearful that
right.
can come out. And yeah, so you want to say anything about this one? I had other thoughts about it as well, but I'd love to hear.
This is a mural my wife Dina painted on the bedroom wall of his room, and he was in a very, very strong dinosaur stage at that time, and his imagination was activated by dinosaur figurines and everything dinosaur. I just happened one day to be putting him to sleep when I saw this look on his face, and it seemed to really capture to me the kind of fear and anxiety that accompanies a child when they go to sleep. It was, yeah. It's not easy being a child. The idea of playing blind man's bluff, which is also the title of one of Schumann's pieces, I thought it fortuitous that I found this picture of my daughter as a 1-year-old playing with my wife. And the picture on the right has always been very important to me because I see my daughter drinking in my wife's figure and her adultness and her womanliness. And it just seems like this is a transfer of power and education taking place in a blink of an eye. There's so much intelligence in that little face and thoughtfulness after they've come out of the bath.
Mm-hmm.
I always found this picture deeply moving.
Initially, I did not see the children in this picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did, and there's so much in here that gets evoked for me around exploration, safety, possibility, uh, danger,
Hmm.
all wrapped up together.
Right. These are little figures in a big, big world that is pretty hard to comprehend. Even for an adult, in the Metropolitan Museum, when you come across these Assyrian figures carved in stone, it's really an astounding feeling. I can't imagine what it's like for a small child to see such a thing. But that's that's the sum and substance of these pictures. Little people in a big world. The picture on the left comes from a skate park near Yankee Stadium that has the number 4 train riding overhead, almost ominously, with a little tree branch sticking out to suggest a little bit of nature. I love the activity of these kids who are full of energy and style. Yeah. Again, I guess it's another form of parallel play.
Mhm.
The picture on the right caught my attention because one of the things that characterize children is obliviousness. And it appears in several other pictures in which kids are playing around people who are infirm or old, and they're not paying any attention whatsoever. They're completely in their own world. And this fellow has his crutches aesthetically crossed, lying on a bench. He's clearly not doing too well, but they don't notice. In the background, I think there's somebody in a wheelchair. It's a combination of disabilities and abilities,
Mhm. And
joy and pain.
in a way, it looks like they may notice and not care.
Yes, I think that's true.
Not be negative.
We all they take everything in, but they don't care. They're oblivious. When Bernie looked at the picture on the left, and for those who don't know, Bernie is a mutual friend who's a painter. He commented that the water dripping off the kid's head in the foreground looked like the stroke of a paintbrush. I thought that was very telling.
And that's Bernard Greenwald, who is a painter, and he grew up very close to each other in Newark, just around the corner from each other.
Yeah, we grew up around the corner from each other. He found me on Facebook and thought my name sounded familiar. And I found Bernie's paintings to be very moving and, in some cases, chaotic and vivid. And I loved having as we say in Yiddish, a landsman, to be nostalgic about an area that was very difficult to be nostalgic about, especially a time of our lives that was difficult to be nostalgic about. But it's something, it's a bond that we have, which I treasure. Some of these pictures have stories. The one on the left is taken in Malawi, Africa. I was just driving along on the highway and came across a van that was on fire, and kids were playing in it as it burned. It had been carrying a shipment of peanuts, and somehow during transportation, these peanuts caught fire. And because of the peanut oil, the bags burned for days. And these kids found this burned out hulk of a van with fire still in the cargo area, and were playing as happily as could be. Some of them were sitting in the driver's seat. Yeah. I don't want everybody to think that I only photograph in color. The picture on the left is a commentary, again, on the difference in the kind of life children lead in different parts of the world. This child is in Uganda. He's pushing a bicycle up a hill, and he's probably doing it for some commercial reason. He's carrying something because the bike is too heavy for him to pedal. Whereas the kid on the right, several kids are riding their bikes just for the sheer pleasure of it. The disparity in their lives is striking to me. One of the troubling aspects of traveling around the world to places where children don't have the same benefits of middle-class life is that you can feel like a merchant vessel on the sea, watching as a raft full of refugees waves their tattered flag to have you slow down. It's a helpless feeling to be an observer of such trauma.
Well, that also with the picture going back a couple of direction. With this picture too, I would imagine that feeling of, taking the picture and also of the danger that the kids are in.
Yeah. You can't see it, but in the picture on the right, one of the kids chasing the other kid is holding a pistol. Water pistol, I imagine. I hope. Well, I have a blank page to indicate we're moving into another world, the world of color. Yeah, there's the picture of the boy climbing out of the grate. Two natural elements in a struggle to survive. The tree seems to manage it, but it's pretty well scarred. And I imagine he will be also. That's in Cuba. And I can't imagine what it's like in Cuba now without the tourist industry that was benefiting them so much before the pandemic. There's that pistol again on the right. It's a kind of ominous foreshadowing of adult life, I'm afraid. Ah, the circle, the simple circle. In Africa, there aren't many toys to play with, but there are lots of abandoned hoops and tires, and kids find ingenious ways to use these to play. I like the expression of the kid on the left, who seems to be looking heavenward, imagining something that is grand. Or what his intentions are, I don't know. The kid on the right is wearing a tire the way someone might wear a piece of jewelry. In fact, I have photographed jewelry that people wear in outlandish contemporary art jewelry that people wear, this would be in keeping with that mode.
It also reminds me of the way, though the carrying of this is going downward, the way that some women carry water in it's
On their, yeah,
just the positioning of his head and the balance.
right. Kids in masks, that's another component of childhood. The kid in my right doesn't have a mask, but he's using the empty wrapper of a potato chip bag as a kind of mask. And I think that pretty much delineates the kind of toys he has to play with. He'll do anything to be a child, even if it's using a piece of plastic rubbish as a mask. There are the shadows again on the left of kids on a fairgrounds ride, in contrast to a marketplace, I believe this was, in Malawi. Again, two different kinds of experiences. The pairings are deliberate in this book.
Yeah.
The kids on the right are playing among bales of cotton. And the kids on the left are clowning for the camera. I generally don't include those kind of photographs in which the kids are making direct contact with me. I prefer to be an observer of their activity. But I was so struck by the composition that they naturally formed of triangles and shapes and different poses and their ebullience, I decided to include it. This kid was skating at the same park near Yankee Stadium that I photographed before. He was so elegant and skillful that I was really in genuine jealous awe of his ability to do what he was doing.
He looks like a dancer, doesn't he?
He does. The kid on the right was just jumping off a diving board in Cazenovia, New York. There's a lake there. I nearly got arrested taking this picture because it raised the ire of several parents who didn't like the idea of having their children photographed while they played in the water. This has been a recurring problem for photographers in general, is the suspicion that a camera seems to engender. I only wanted to photograph their shadows and their playfulness. They just assumed I was a child molester and got very agitated with me. Richard Hofstadter wrote a book once called The Paranoid Style of American Politics. And I think he was really onto something. A deep paranoid streak within the cultural history of this country.
This one on the left, again, that the like the solitude of childhood is really so strong in that one.
Yeah. Also in the right, the child doesn't really look like a child. He seems to have an adult face.
And whose idea is this haircut anyway?
Yeah, I don't know, but I love the cape that the barber has used to cover him. That's a photographer's dream. Ah, yeah, this scene on the left is a mystery to me. It's just something that I saw quickly and it passed. But it's certainly a scene of her childhood, riding on the lap of her disabled mother, being pushed down a street in Havana.
The thing that really strikes me in that one is that she's totally at ease, that child, in that.
Yes, that's right. She's in her mother's lap. Yeah.
And being held, and
Yeah.
she has what she needs.
Yeah.
In that moment.
This is another, on the right, another picture of the young and the old making their way down a sunlit street. The one on the right is wearing a pair of roller skates, but it's not very happy roller skating because it's a cobbled street. Neither of them are having an easy way of it.
Mm.
Yeah. Sometimes you see kids doing something and you just can't believe your eyes. In the picture on the left, which is made in Havana, these kids are forming a kind of train being pulled by a bicycle while an authentic antique car drives in the background. The picture on the right comes from Malawi, and it shows a woman in the background about to lift a bundle of firewood on her head to be transported to market. The child is carrying a smaller bundle, but still a pretty heavy load for a small child. When I saw this woman, I asked to lift the bundle. I wanted to see how heavy it was, and I could barely budge it. And through a translator, I learned that she gets up at 5 in the morning and hikes up into the mountains to gather this firewood, bundles it in this enormous load, and hikes it down 3 hours into a marketplace where she's able to sell it for the equivalent of $1.75. And I was so struck by her musculature and the difficulty of her life and the overall disparity between her reality and mine. And then having this child in the foreground, it just was overwhelming to me. There was not a word of complaint from her about this. She hoisted that bundle on top of her head and just marched on down to get her $1.75. And the next day she was going to get up and do it all over again. It's amazing what people endure.
Well, it's another too, the cycle of life, right? The young and the older.
Right. The saddest aspect of this picture to me is that the girl will probably end up doing that when she grows up to be a woman.
Yeah.
She has no opportunities as such, none for education, none for mobility. It's a sad truth, but they're alive and vital while they're alive. Very vital.
And I wonder too, if it's like, I mean, obviously the especially the older of the two is, it looks like everything, every ounce that she has is going into what she
Yeah.
is doing. And
Yeah.
you know,
That bundle, by the way, weighs about 130 pounds.
and that single-mindedness,
Mm-hmm.
You also wonder, is there a gift that goes along with that, of being like totally or something. It looks as though everything that she has, almost more than anything I've ever seen, everything is going into what she is doing.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Something I noticed also was that the women who are walking down this path were all barefoot. Many of them were carrying moccasins in their hands along with the bundle. They didn't want to wear their shoes out.
Mm.
Sometimes I'm just overwhelmed by the optical joy of seeing circles in the kids' eyes appear in a single frame. The picture on the right, I struggled with whether I should include it because it's a scene of so much desperation and fear. She's terrified of me. She's terrified of her life, it seems. And the shadows of the hut that she's living in, that she's standing next to, seem to be imprisoning her. And she's looking directly at me. It's a challenge for a photographer. I leave some money with these people, but it's really just a token. I don't know what the solution is. Yeah. Beautiful picture on the left of a small child walking with his mother while being followed by a lamb. Whereas kids, their tire, and in the distance, a shadow of the boy hanging from the tree, from the limb of a tree, is present. One picture is peaceable and the other is extremely active. Yeah, these pictures complement each other. Kids at play. One is in Cuba on the left and the other is in India on the right. I love kids in motion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of poetry.
And kids in trees also, because there's something about the height that it gives to be up in a tree and to be able to view the world from up there.
Right. It's a kind of fortress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even the kids in the picture on the right are using the shelf of the building to give themselves some height.
Right.
Love this one with the cow following.
Yeah, the cows are characters you see everywhere in Rajasthan. They meander, they parade, they die in the street, and occasionally they gore a tourist who's not too careful. But for the most part, these little kids run in and out of these cows just like they're friends of theirs, you know, without any muss or fuss. And the cow seems to be thinking in this picture, I care for that little girl. I hope she doesn't get hurt running down the street. It's like a grandmother looking after their child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I found this picture on the left to be as disturbing as any that you've put in. And
Really?
I do.
Tell me why.
I think it has to do with I'll be the image that you would like to see. And you can dress me up to do that. I don't know. It to me, it is
This is a big day in Hispanic culture. This is quinceañeros. The girls turn 15 and they deck them out in these outfits and they photograph them and parade them around. I'm not sure why the year 15 was selected. In our country, it's we have the Sweet 16 party.
yeah.
In the southern tier, it's the quinceañeros, 15. Yeah. Well, the girls seem to be enjoying their moment of attention anyway. Who knows what happens when they turn 17 or 18?
Yeah. And I'm going to have to really, sit with like why this feels as egregious as any picture to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that says something just about my association with who one needs to impress or who one needs to present for. And
Right.
I agree that there's something in their bodies that feels like that they're in it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's part of the problem.
Right. Yeah, they've been trained from an early age to be objects of beauty, and here is their crowning moment. Yeah.
And then that is juxtaposed to this family, which is like 5 on a motorcycle or on a.
Right. That's a common sight in India. That's how people get around. The picture on the right is a mystery. I was visiting a house in the countryside. This is the home of the mother of a dear friend of mine who was basically being my guide. And they have no furniture in the house itself. People just sit on the floor or lie on the floor. And that's his mother lying on the floor, and a little boy was going back and forth, rolling a tire. Pretty good optics, again, for the photographer, and quite a mystery, especially if you look in the background, a veiled woman is sitting. On the left, you've got a different kind of veil. The kid is wearing a bucket as he plays in the street with a fire hydrant and other friends of his.
So interestingly, to me, the picture on the right, it evokes something of an ease that each person is expressing in their bodies in different ways.
Yeah, yeah. I was shocked at how comfortable this woman was just lying down in front of me. It was very unusual.
I was
Young
thinking,
people. Yeah, go
I was
ahead.
thinking in the left one that there are numerous places in your photographs where things are deteriorating in one way or another, and yet
Yes.
there's a life that's also vibrantly happening within it. And
Yeah, entropy is one of my favorite themes, the way things fall apart, but life seems to continue around it anyway. The picture on the left is a good example of entropy. There's been a car accident, this van is overturned, and people have gathered, witnesses, to look, to be interested in it, and why a white photographer would bother to stop and photograph something like this. That juxtaposed with this picture made in southern France of a lazy day at the lake. Well, this page again is one of those jarring pages. A young child, infant, is brushing her hair in this gorgeous Renaissance light with a little kitty next to her. The reflection of her father appears dimly in a damaged mirror on the upper right. And the picture on the right shows an ancient woman. I mean, in India, you never know how old somebody is. She could be 50 for all I know. But these kids surrounded her and were intrigued by me, but were basically making fun of her. And I found it extremely disturbing, at the same time photogenic. And I thought it's just part of childhood obliviousness and also childhood cruelty. The one thing I wanted to get to in the other pictures is more towards the end of the book, where we can go on. Okay, go back one page.
I love this one.
So this is a picture on the left made in Rajasthan. And the clear love and affection the man has for this young boy is so evident in the way he's holding his head. And the same is true of my son being cradled by my mother-in-law on the right. I was just struck by the similarity of their care and concern in these pictures. I love the two coffee cups in the foreground. They've just had a cup of tea, actually, I think, the two of them. And they're having a quiet moment on the couch. It's a rare scene of genuine tenderness, which is often not part of what photographers choose to depict. We're getting towards the the last part of the transformation of the book. On the next page, you'll see my mother-in-law comforting my son. She's got some concern about something he has said. And on the right, 10 years have elapsed and he is comforting her. Her husband is in ill health. He's in the background. And I just thought this is part of the cycle of childhood, this reversal of roles in which the adult comforts the child and then the child comforts the adult. And that's where the book goes. On the next page, you see my mother-in-law on the left, my wife on the right, and the tiny figure of my mother-in-law on the left and my wife on the right again, moving off into some undetermined space.
And in each of these last maybe 6 or 8 pictures, it's the hands that really, and even when you don't see them, you don't see your wife holding the hand of your mother-in-law, but there's so much expression of tenderness through hands in these pictures.
Right.
Well, thank you for taking us through this, journey through so much, so much through the eyes of childhood, but really through so much of life, and especially for the perspective of that the difficulty and the complicated and very different circumstances that people go through childhood.
Well, thank you for your keen questions and keen observations. And thank you for this opportunity to say something about my work.
It's such a pleasure. So thank you all for joining us for this edition of Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick. My guest today has been Ralph Gabriner, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.